The Dale Show.
Do you want to do the how many tabs does Dale have open from Wikipedia?
How many Wikipedia tabs does Dale have open today? Or how many tabs? How many rabbit holes did you go down on that one?
I've got 8 Wikipedia tabs open.
Okay.
And
That's
I closed all the other tabs. So I have Operation Paperclip tab, Kurt H. Debus. Oh, this is going to be extra special, awesome for anybody who's like pumped on hearing me mispronounce German words.
Oh my God, this is going to be great. I can't wait. Yeah.
There's so many German words.
I'm already stoked.
Kranzberg Castle.
Yep.
Werner von Braun, of course.
Of course. You can't even do one of these without him.
Office of Strategic Services, which is the precursor for CIA.
Okay.
The OSS, which doesn't really come into this because, okay, full disclosure, I wasn't going to do an Operation Paperclip episode. I was going to do an MK Ultra episode, but like everything else in modern history that's kind of on the hanky or dirty undertone or conspiracy theory, it all started with the fucking Nazis. And because they had gotten because they got a bunch of scientists over from Germany through Operation Paperclip, like they got Werner von Braun and a bunch of others like rocket scientists, but they also got biological warfare scientists and stuff.
Yeah.
And those people ended up going to do MK Ultra. And I was actually listening to one of my sources is Last Podcast on the Left. They're doing a series on MK Ultra right now. And I was like, oh, I'll do MK Ultra. Because we always bring it up when we're talking about these conspiracies, me and you.
Yeah, it stems back to that. It all stems back to Operation Paperclip, really, right? Like, yeah.
And I was like, well, it would be nice to do some steak and potatoes episodes instead of the esoteric, like magic and like sigil magic and stuff that the Illuminati's doing and stuff. And so I figured we'd start with MK Ultra. But then while I was listening to MK Ultra, I was like, well, it's through Paperclip. So I was like, fuck. So I'll do that. And so, yeah, so we're going to talk about my whole thing of this whole thing. But sorry, I'm in research mode, so I'm not like in like talk fluently mode.
Okay, you're like, all over the place. Like,
so I'm like, it's like almost like I have what do we call Asperger's now that we're not allowed to say Asperger's? I keep forgetting this.
Neurodivergence?
Is that it? I thought neurodivergent was for everything.
I think it is. Yeah.
Anyways,
I don't know. I actually don't know. I'm not up on my
PC word we're allowed to say that means the same thing. That's how I feel right now, because I was just like crunching information and like copying links and reading through. Because one thing about Wikipedia is it makes you crazy because it's not just like in chronological order. Like
it's in chronological order if you don't click the links.
Well, actually,
well, you're right. It's in topic. It's in chronological order within the topics.
Broken into
within
topics.
Yeah, it's broken into topics. Yeah.
Like if you go to
the timelines are fluid throughout the various entries.
Yeah. So
I see what you mean.
Kind of got to think about going back and then like piecing stuff together and like
And
that's where my mind is right now.
Each section is chronologically laid out, but each section sort of overlaps one another. So you have to sort of build the timeline for yourself a little bit while you're reading it.
But sometimes the sections, they'll have like one section, like with Werner von Braun, I'll bring it up as an example. So they have like Werner von Braun, they have his basic like bio at the beginning, and then they have early life and career and stuff. And then they'll be like career in Germany. You're like, okay. And then there'll be like work under Nazis, experiments with rocket aircraft, slave labor, arrest and release, blah, blah, blah. And then they go to American career and you're like, yeah. And then they go to popular concepts of human presence in space. And that kind of goes back and forth. And then they go religious conversion. And that steps back to before his American career and stuff. And then they go to concepts of orbital warfare, and then they go to NASA career. So it's like they're hopping around between the 40s and 50s and 70s and stuff.
Yeah,
so.
Totally. And depending on what the topic is at hand, right? Like, yeah, the Werner von Braun thing is like, that's the crux of everything. He single-handedly, by having him, we can't even really call it defecting, can we? Because they just sort of brought him over. and made
No,
him
he
into a
did. He
citizen.
did defect.
I don't know. It wasn't really a defection though.
No,
Like
he gave up.
wasn't he captured? I thought he was.
No, he
Yeah,
gave
he was
up to
captured.
Americans.
What's effectively being captured, right?
Well, they were in a city that was captured because
Yeah.
there's this thing. Well, I
It
was going to
was-
get into it later, but he on purpose gave up to the Americans because here I'll just
Yeah, and it was kind of like
Okay,
oh, should we do an introduction first and say hello?
Okay, let's cover Operation Paperclip
Okay,
before we get into the intricacies of Werner von Braun,
Roger that.
because he's just like the prize medallion of Operation
Yeah,
Paperclip.
yeah. Really, realistically, that's he was. He and his team of scientists and like that single-handedly changed the way rocketry was like even looked at in the United States prior to that. Like he's the whole reason that the U.S. got to the moon first.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start at the beginning with Operation Paperclip.
Okay.
And
welcome to the Dale Show. What episode is this?
12. Oh, hello. Welcome to Dale Show, episode 12, where we're going to cover Operation Paperclip. And we're going to jump around. There's going to be a lot of Wikipedia reading. Sorry in advance / you're welcome if you like it. I don't know.
Wikipedia.
Yeah. The thing about Wikipedia, I was telling Jeff before we started recording, is you can't just go into Wikipedia like I was just complaining it's kind of all out of order. Yeah. But it's like you go into Wikipedia and then you start opening windows. Like with Operation Paperclip, I started there, and then I went to like Werner von Braun, and then there's this other scientist. What's his name? I have it right here. Kurt Blom. So you start reading Kurt Blom stuff, and then it says stuff about Operation Paperclip that the Operation Paperclip doesn't necessarily say, and then pages have quotes everywhere. So I kind of tried to piece everything together in this like sort of jigsaw puzzle. Hope it makes sense for you guys. I mean, if it doesn't, you get your full refund. But if you're listening to Spotify, I'm not going to give you your $20 a month back because
no, screw that crap. We can't afford that.
So enough of me rambling. Let's start from the beginning with Operation Paperclip.
All right.
So I have a little synopsis, 1 or 2 sentences. So Operation Paperclip was a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from former Nazi Germany to the U.S. for government employment after the World War II in Europe between 1945 and 1959. The primary purpose of Operation Paperclip was U.S. military advantage in the Soviet-American Cold War and the space race. But funnily enough, I don't know if you could say that, Operation Paperclip didn't start as Operation Paperclip. Did you research the beginnings of Operation Paperclip?
Yeah. So it started as, wasn't that the whole thing of that documentary? It started off as PO Box 1142.
Well, that was just one of the black sites that they brought German scientists to.
Right.
So, yeah, what Jeff was talking about is there's a little half-hour documentary on Netflix that everybody should watch. It's good. It adds a lot of color to this whole situation because it deals with a lot of the humanity of like Jewish refugees who came to America, and they end up working at this camp where as part of Operation Paperclip, the Nazis come to live and they kind of sort of interrogate them or whatever for like from 1942 to 46.
Yeah, it was Jewish Germans who escaped pre the war in 1939 who came over. They became naturalized American citizens and joined the army, and they were singled out because they were German speaking. And so they were taken after their basic training and put onto this black site base to basically interview captured Nazi and German scientists.
And the name of that documentary is Camp Confidential: America's Secret Nazis, and that's on Netflix.
Yeah.
So, but it actually started before that, because in early 1943, after Germany failed in their attack on Russia, and that's this whole Barbarossa operation and stuff. Basically, I don't know, everybody should be familiar with this history, but if you're not, what happened was Germany had 2 fronts: the Eastern Front, where they're fighting basically Britain and all those guys on the left side of Europe, and then on the right side they're fighting the Russians.
Left side of Europe, Western Europe.
Yeah,
there we go.
No, they were fighting because Germany was about as west as you could go for Europe, and they
Uh,
were fighting eastward. So that's the Eastern Front. And
yeah.
then the Western Front was there fighting Russia. And Hitler got all dick hard after Russia because he was going to take over Russia, use their resources, and then kind of conquer everybody else. But what he didn't realize was how big Russia was. So as he moved his troops into Russia, Russia pulled their troops back and basically blew up everything behind them. And so the Germans just kind of failed by running out of supplies and freezing in the Russian winter and stuff. And that was Operation Barbarossa, and it was a failure. So what happened then was Germany started to they realized that Russia would make a counterattack, so they'd have to be on the defense. So what they did was they started calling back all their scientists, engineers, and technicians that were out like doing various jobs in the war, like driving truck and in the bakery and stuff. So they would take them back and just bolster their defenses. So there's this guy, Werner Osenberg, who I think I nailed that one. It's probably
That
the
was
last
pretty.
one I'll nail.
That's the last one. Yeah, that was an easy one.
Yeah.
That's introductory.
He was the engineer scientist heading the Defense Research Association for Germany, which I'm going to read the German name.
Oh, here we go. This should
Here
be
we
good.
go.
This is what you're paying for right here.
Verforschungsgemeinschaft.
Tell me more about your shaft.
So this guy, Werner Osenberg, he made this giant list called the Osenberg list, where he would take all, like, they basically tracked down all the scientists Germany had in the war effort. They put their name in a list, and then they wanted to kind of do a checklist to see if they would be politically cleared to work as Nazis, and not just like, because like the thing I guess with Nazi Germany is not everybody was super keen on the Nazi stuff.
Yeah.
And they actually kept a lot of like the work camps and stuff secret from the regular citizens in the war. Because you can imagine Joe Blow German soldiers not going to go fight for a country that's starving people to death in like Auschwitz and stuff. So they kept this stuff secret. And that's what they meant by politically clearing these people. So after he politically cleared these like certain scientists and stuff, he came up with the Osenberg list, which they were going to start. And they started like, they got like rocket people and stuff that they needed to fight off the Russians and stuff. And then once they were destroyed, once Germany lost the war, or they were losing the war, there's this like in Bonn University in March 1945, this Polish laboratory technician found pieces of the Osenberg list stuffed into a toilet because I guess they're trying to flush it on their way out, running out.
Yeah.
So he found this. Yeah, he found this list, and he gives the list to MI6, who transmitted it to U.S. intelligence, then U.S. Army Major Robert B. Staver, chief of the Jet Propulsion Section of the Research and Intelligence Branch of the U.S. Army Ordnance Corps, used the Osenberg list to compile his list of German scientists to be captured and interrogated. Werner von Braun was
one of the
top of
the
this
linchpin.
list. So what they did was
the ace of spades.
Yeah. And the reason that the U.S. wanted this Osenberg list, this was even before they wanted to get people to fight Russia in the Cold War. This was still because this was post Germany surrendering, but they were still fighting Japan at the time, because I don't know if many people know, Japan kind of held on for a while after the war was technically over between Germany and Italy. Kind of were like, we give up, but Japan wasn't giving up. So what happened was America was going to use this Osenberg list in this thing called Project Overcast, where they would take people from the list, they would take them to here, I have it written down. Okay, so it started with Operation Overcast, which was July 1945, which was initially started to shorten the war with Japan because Germany had surrendered in May, like I just said. So initial priorities were the advanced technology such as infrared that could be used in the war against Japan, finding out what technology had been passed on to Japan, like if Germany had passed anything to Japan. So they were going to interrogate all the scientists and officers of the Nazis and see what was going on where. And then a project to halt the research was called codename Project Safe Haven. So they kind of also wanted to stop all the research the Nazis were doing, because a lot of the Nazis were going to like Spain, Argentina, and Egypt, because they didn't want. So Project Overcast was, they wanted to track down all the main scientists before they fled to these different countries. So
that's how they got them all together. Then that explains like how they got all the scientists into sort of one location to be able to be transported, because most of them arrived in the US at roughly the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And
so
it was
that's
sort of like
what happened. And they actually
right.
sent them to a couple sites where they would actually interrogate them. And one of them was, I guess, sorry, it's just like, it's
okay.
unclear when.
I don't know what the sites were either, right? Like
yeah,
I know there was sort of a race between the Americans and the Russians to court the German scientists. So that was
that's
part
actually
of the reason to
true, because
together.
because Russian and America are still fighting Japan at this time.
Yeah.
And they're like, at best, they're frenemies, but they're kind of like trying to pick apart to see who, like another reason that the Americans were getting these people in Project Overcast was to make sure they didn't go to Russia.
Right.
Because some of them did.
Yeah.
So they said, so Operation Overcast, I think once they defeated Japan, it turned into Operation Paperclip, because what happened was, okay, I gotta take a step back. So
he's got to go check one of his links.
I gotta go look at
Hold on, it's here.
There's this thing called Kranzberg Castle.
Yes.
And that is one of the main interrogation sites.
Yeah.
So the only thing I'm taking a step back is Operation Overcast actually just gets renamed Operation Paperclip. And the reason they called it Operation Paperclip was the big list that they used, Osenberg list that they used to get everybody for Operation Overcast and then interrogate them. And then from there, anybody they wanted to keep or maybe for future employ in the US, I think they put a paperclip on their file.
On the file. Yeah, that was.
I think it was a blue paperclip I heard somewhere, but that could just be like.
Didn't hear any color coding of the paperclips. Yeah. I just heard that there was like a paperclip. It wasn't like common practice to use that at the time. So
yeah, because Operation Paperclip, something you hear in passing and so much, like not even like nonfiction, even fiction, like they'll bring it out. And I think it was just one of those. They said blue paperclip or whatever. So I'm not saying they were all blue paperclips, but for some reason I have blue paperclip in my head, and I shouldn't even be worrying about it because it's very insignificant in the whole
in the grand scheme of things. That's it. Now I know what to get you for Christmas. I'm just get you a box of blue paperclips.
Yeah. Or a red paperclip I could trade into a house.
There you go. Yeah. Oh man, that's a weird story. Okay. So weird tangent.
Yeah. So they have these guys at the castle. So during the time at the castle, through interrogation and finding the research of the Nazi doctors, so they also didn't have all the research papers and results and all other stuff. So they would like interrogate these doctors, and then they started finding their research that they'd hidden away. They uncovered a unique store of knowledge about the human body. The knowledge was valuable because the only way you could come about acquiring it was if you could experiment on humans who were made to suffer extremely and even die. The morality of all the Allied doctors and institutions thankfully prevented them from using this sort of nightmare means to get the results. So basically what this means is, this is where you come to the crux of the morality of Operation Paperclip, because a lot of the science that they wanted to keep is from the Germans who were torturing people to death in the camps. So it's like, should we keep this knowledge? But on the other hand, you can't get this knowledge and science without it. So you don't want to just let it go because there's no way you could reattain it.
Right.
Because you have all
because without atrocities. Yeah. Like, I think maybe this is a brief aside, but I think one of my favorite pieces of the Kranzberg Castle thing was like how in the, like just after the year 2000, they were using it as a small business park for information and technology businesses.
Yeah.
The castle.
That
It's
was
like it had like
wild.
this really brief period. It's like this huge historical thing. It had like Third Reich connotations. But then in like the .com boom, it was used as a business park for small businesses that were
Yeah,
tech
that's
based.
wild, eh? Like
I
they're
know it's
just
so
like,
funny.
oh, let's turn it into an incubator and get people
Yeah,
to do their startups and
yeah,
stuff.
totally. Let's get yeah. German Twitter
Yeah,
has started there. Anyway, sorry.
that's fine.
I
So
just thought
one
it
of
was
the
like a funny piece of the injury to the whole
yeah, it
thing.
was because I read that
Yeah.
too. I was like, what? And then I
So
think
yeah,
Hela
it's like
Schuster, which was another black site,
yeah,
I think you can go live like I think it's like a Airbnb kind of thing right now where you can go
yeah.
stay there. But don't
I wouldn't do that.
do
That's not a,
not do
that's not a
that because
vacation
Fela
destination.
Schuster is later on the CIA and stuff. It's a black site where they torture people in the basement. Whereas up top, it's like this old, like German style hotel with like all this fancy stuff, but in the basement, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's yikes.
Yeah, big yikes.
Big yikes.
Big yikes.
Did you hear that? Did you I couldn't even imagine sleeping in there and being like, I think I heard somebody being horribly dismembered.
Oh yeah, like,
Like
even
old
if you
ghosts.
don't believe in ghosts or like
Yeah.
a tiny bit, if there's ghosts
Yeah.
in one spot, it's this fucking like CIA torture den in the wilderness. There's going to be
Yeah.
a million ghosts there.
See, it's one of the greatest things about living in Canada is it's such a young country that like
Mhm.
A, there's no historical record of the atrocities that happen anywhere on these lands. And B, you know, it's such a huge country that like there's a lot of spread out area, a lot of wilderness. There's not a lot of areas where people died in like mass, gross, weird things that we know of.
Yeah. Or if you do have a place like that, like the Picton farm, they just
Right.
bulldoze it and build townhouses.
Build condos
the
on
area.
it. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The government
like,
is like, oh yeah, this we're taking this land
yeah,
and then we're selling it to developers. And
the
then
developers.
developers are like, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you're in
So
Poco,
be
you might
careful.
be living
Yeah.
on the old farm.
No, it's still there.
But the farmland,
Yep.
some
It's
of
all
it they
still
turned into townhouses.
not yet.
Oh really? I
It's
thought they
zoned
had.
for it, but it's not done as far as I know. I just had a conversation with somebody about this. Anyway, we're off topic. Back on track.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
Whatever.
yeah.
So I was
Oh,
wrong
you
about
know,
the Picton
actually, you
farm.
know what? I think you're right. I think you're right. I think they did turn some into townhouses. That was, I think, Anyway, never mind. I'll look at that.
Did we just have a I'm wrong chicken fight where I was like, right as I'm about to admit I was wrong, you're like, no, you're right.
Nope. You're right. You're right. I backed out.
I waited you out.
Nice. You did.
So an example of the information that the Nazis couldn't learn, or not, sorry, an example of the information the Nazis did learn that regular human scientists couldn't get was like how long it takes people to die of toxins and stuff, because no other scientist is just gonna
just do
like
that.
irradiate people and see how long it takes them to die of radiation and shit like that.
Yeah.
So
let me just expose you to radon for a few minutes and see what happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
On the one hand, you're like, you don't want to accept this technology because it's terrible, like I was saying before. But on the other hand, this research could save lives in the essence of people who are accidentally exposed to poisons and stuff.
Yeah.
You would now know how long that person has to live and what the symptoms are of the progression of the poisoning. Like, say, I go under my sink and I drink a bunch of stuff. They would have had
it looks delicious,
list
but I
of the
guarantee you it's not.
symptoms as I was dying.
Yeah.
Because they would just feed it to concentration camp inmates and then like take notes on it stuff.
Yeah. Dicey science.
Yeah. And another thing too was when they did Operation Paperclip, this was before the Manhattan Project had finished. And they were really worried that like that's why I was saying they grabbed like biological warfare guys and rocket guys, because they didn't know where war was going, because one of Germany's plans apparently was to just build poison rockets and just try to poison giant swaths of humanity with their V2 rockets and stuff. So another thing they did was they grabbed, like, Werner von Braun was like the premier scientist guy for rockets, but they also grabbed that Blom guy and took him to, I think it was called Camp Dietrich, and that's where they worked on warfare in the States. So it was like the Camp 1142 we were talking about, but this one was for biowarfare research and stuff. So a bunch of the scientists went there. And then and there's this gas called Tuban gas, Tuban, which the Germans were on the, I guess they were almost had made it. I don't know. I didn't look it up because I'm an idiot. I was too busy researching everything else, but apparently it was like, because one of Hitler's, like, according to last podcast on the left, one of his big, like, fuck you to everyone plans was to do like mass murder suicide, where he would try to poison all of England with rockets and bombs and then kind of kill himself at the same time. Because I don't know if you knew, but Hitler was a little crazy.
A little is understatement.
Yeah.
Earlier when you said like Hitler had a big heart on for it, I'm like, I don't think he did. I think that was part of the issue. There was that whole thing where like there was I remember reading this a while back that Hitler was actually impotent, which was like part of the reason that he was so nuts.
He did do enough drugs to make him impotent, that's for sure.
Yeah, those artists, man, I tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then like 1945 to 55, Operation Paperclip. Like I said, they got 1,600 German and Austrian scientists. I moved them around. And
just gave them lives in America. Like, not for the first little bit, but yeah.
Like
they just became citizens, just became part of the fabric of the United States. Super weird.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy actually, but I mean, at the same time, they didn't really know the depth of because at the Nuremberg trials, they kind of got these people out of it. Like some of these scientists actually. Okay, hold on.
There was another documentary that I watched. I know this is a little bit of an aside. That it was on Netflix as well, and I can't remember. Oh, The Devil Next Door it was called. And it was about this dude who was in like Iowa or Wisconsin, like one of the Midwest states in the United States, who like was Ivan the Terrible at the concentration camps.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was wild too. There was like a 6-part miniseries thing, but it was like it was one of those guys that was sort of came across on the on one of the ships, and he was like, and there were some people that were like positively identifying him. He's just this dude that was like living his life as part of the church and in a random place in the United States, and he was like, it was Ivan the Terrible. He like killed and murdered a bunch of Jewish people and stuff. So there's lots of stories like that about people who escaped Germany or Nazis who escaped Germany and like were here in America. And that's sort of like one of those things you start to apply it to today's like the rise of the neo-Nazi within our society. I'm like, they never really left. They were invited here. They weren't tried as war criminals, and they were allowed to become American citizens. So
I do have to push back on that.
No, go for it.
Because it wasn't like every Nazi who came to America was brought over by Operation Paperclip.
No, not at all.
Like, I know that's not what you're saying. I just want to like emphatically point out, even though it was terrible, it was kind of like an ends justify the means things, where if they were bringing people over on Operation Paperclip, it was because they were scientists they wanted to exploit and stuff against Russia and stuff. Whereas like Jeff was saying, there was a lot of like at the end of the war, it was like chaos. So a lot of Nazis were just like leaving and escaping, like I said before, to like Spain and Argentina and Egypt and stuff. And there's like one of the guys I was going to talk about, I think it was Taub. Was it Taub? Because I researched a couple scientists that came over in Operation Paperclip just to like see what was like the main ones, and Taub was one of them. He was like one of the bioweapon guys, and he came, I forgot what I was talking about. Oh yeah, he came over to America, but then he went to Argentina afterwards. And then there's that whole conspiracy theory
of the Argentinian Nazis. Like
about
the South American
how
Nazi
Hitler, some say Hitler didn't die and he escaped to Argentina, where he went, and he apparently didn't do anything because Argentina never rose as like a world power.
So yeah, you and I talked about this on one of the previous podcasts about like a potential Nazi enclave within like there's a number of German people that live in South America, like a
Yeah.
lot. So yeah, interesting stuff. A lot of blonde-haired, blue-eyed South Americans.
Yeah, because like I said, like they were apologists, so like
Yeah,
even regular citizens from Germany would have escaped to there.
yeah, totally.
And I think they even set up like little German camp, like little
Yeah,
villages,
little
and
towns
stuff.
and stuff. Yeah, totally. I mean, you see that here too. We have them close at hand, right? Like there's a Bavarian town just south of here at was it Leavenworth in maybe it's called something else. It's just over the border in Washington State.
Oh, really?
There's a little German town.
That'd be.
And-
I'd want to go check that out. Maybe once this whole.
Once we're allowed
bullshit's
to?
over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Looking it up right now.
Oh, nice.
Germantown in Washington State. It's like the computer was listening to me. Leavenworth. Yeah, it's Leavenworth in Washington. It's a little like it's literally a German. Like my dad took me there when I was a kid. I just remember going to see it, and it's yeah, like a little tiny German town just over the border, and it's really close to us. Like we could go.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also rumors that was like Nazis that or people who defected from Germany like right around that time or started that little. They wanted to recreate Bavaria in the United States.
Because I mean, even if they weren't Nazis, they would have been like, because the whole, like we uncovered in that, or not uncovered, like we covered in that, the cult beliefs of the Nazis and stuff was like, even if you have Bavarians or whatever come and live over here, Nazis kind of came from this sort of bastardized rendition of Lebensform, which was like return to nature and stuff. So even
it's
if
important to note that Germans aren't necessarily Nazis and vice versa.
Yeah. But like you could see where someone who believed in the whole Lebensform thing, but not carried all the way to like racial superiority.
Right. Just
held some of the beliefs.
Yeah. So that's sort of what that village in Washington looks like. It's more of that and less Nazi and more like cool Germany stuff.
Damn, that's the end of my notes for Operation Paperclip, but I feel like there should have been more to it. But
I mean, the crux of it is that Operation Paperclip really changed the course of the war, and it changed the course of everything else. You wanted to talk about the CIA and
I was going to save that for the MK Ultra because
cool.
The OSS started around this time during the end of the war, but then the president disbanded them, and then 2 years later, because the OSS was like an American Secret Service thing where they're I don't know. I'll get into it on that, but
so yeah, once Operation Paperclip kind of turns into MK Ultra, this is when it starts to get really interesting and kind of fun, or when it sort of bleeds into it, it turns into that part. Yeah. So yeah, MK Ultra starts. I know you don't want to talk about it now. We can talk about it on the next episode. But yeah, MK Ultra is like the mind stuff and the drugs and the like human aspect of like super soldier creation, and it's like that shit gets wild. That shit gets wild, and it's so like that is so much more interesting. The Operation Paperclip piece is interesting in how it changed the course of history in terms of how the United States progressed into the nation that it currently is. But then like MK Ultra is like this is the like assassin creation stuff that is amazing and it's so fun.
Yeah, it is really good. Like I just wanted to make sure, like, do you feel like we covered all of Operation Paperclip? Because on one hand it's like this big extensive thing, but on the other hand it's like
it's
far
really
as talking about it, it's like 1 or 2 years, and it's basically pretty simple where it's like we took their scientists and brought them here.
Yeah, I mean that's really the crux of it, right? And I think you're right. There's not so you have meat and potatoes. This is a good historical introduction into the next part. So this is like part 1 of 2 for where we're going with this. And absolutely, this is like I think you covered everything major that you wanted to. The big pieces on this were Werner von Braun. And
I have
and
a bunch of notes on Werner von Braun. We can cover.
He was hired by was it the CIA after NASA? He had like several careers with American pieces.
After NASA,
because he was like he was the dude. Like people
Oh, dude, do
fucking
you want to get?
talked about this
Let's
guy.
get into Werner von Braun. 'Cause I
Sure,
took a
let's
whole
do
bunch of
that.
notes.
I do know
But,
a little bit about him because I remember
yeah.
like studying him in high school, and I was just
Short answer was after NASA, he became vice president for engineering and development at the aerospace company Fairchild Industries.
Fairchild. That's what it was. I couldn't remember what it was.
Which,
Fairchild. Yeah, which is like that's like a whole big thing
It's a
too.
weird name.
Well,
Okay,
yeah.
so let's talk about Werner von Braun. Or do you want to save Werner von Braun for? No, let's talk about. Okay, sorry, I'll just explain my erratic thinking. I'm thinking, should we save Werner von Braun for last, and like talk about some of the chemical guys? But let's talk about Werner von Braun, because if we run out of time, then we could talk about those other guys later.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Sure.
Werner von Braun. Let's talk about the medals Werner von Braun got.
Oh my God!
After
Yeah,
he
that
came
dude's
here. So he
decorated.
received the NASA Distinguished Service Medal, the Goddard Astronautics Award,
Yeah.
not astronautics.
There we go.
Kind of
Astronautics.
bled
Yeah.
my words together. The National Medal of Science and Engineering. He was inducted into the U.S. Space Camp Hall of Fame, the International Space Hall of Fame, and he even has a crater on the fucking moon named after
Yeah, named after him. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear his full name?
I'd love his full. I was gonna say his full name because it's the best thing in the world.
Werner Magnus Maximilian Freiherr von Braun.
That's brilliant. It's brilliant. So
That's like 6 names.
Yeah.
So,
it's funny too. I read something else, and I don't know if this is true because I don't see it on the. Oh yeah. So technically, he was born in what is now Poland.
Yeah.
So he was born in, like, it was technically Germany at the time he was born in what is it, like the 1912?
Yeah.
Something like that.
23rd of March 1912.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So yeah, he was born in like what is now Germany, but wasn't Germany at the time of his born, but he's like a prominent German American scientist, but he's technically he's Prussian, whatever. So yeah, I find him fascinating simply because like he's like known as the father of modern rocket science. Like even to this day, the rocket technology that we use is all based on shit he did. Yeah. And this dude was like doing it for the Nazis. He made those V1 and V2 missiles that were like extended long range rockets that powered missiles that they were trying to get to the United States. Yeah. So all this shit's fucked. Like it's just crazy.
Do you want to know what V2 stands for?
Yes, I do. I don't actually know. So yeah.
Vergeltungswaffe.
Ooh, Dale nailed it.
Which
proud of you.
In English means retaliation vengeance weapon.
Yeah.
So basically V2 stands for Vengeance 2.
Nice.
And
that's
it started as A2 rockets or whatever, but Werner von Braun, he basically started. It was funny because they started before they made just rockets. They were fucking around with planes, and they put like jets on planes for the first time.
Yeah. So that was wild. Like there's a bunch of stuff like that he was responsible for, like helping create, right?
Yeah. And then so the rockets he put, I don't know if the V2s were the same, but the rockets he put on planes were alcohol with liquid oxygen mixed, and then they would light it.
Oh my God, that just gives me like this. I don't know a lot about chemistry, but I know enough about chemistry. That shit is frightening.
Yeah, basically, for the non-burn, non-pyromaniac people, alcohol would be the gas, and oxygen acts as an accelerant. So oxygen by itself isn't flammable, but the oxygen atoms and stuff attach to the alcohol and make the alcohol burn a lot hotter. So it's like in the movie Backdraft, where he tells them to not open the door. He told them to not open the door because the oxygen would rush in and feed the fire.
Feeds the fire, makes it grow.
Because if you take a piece of wood and you try burn it, but you don't have enough oxygen, that'll go out. Like that's why you blow on fires, and that's why you have those big
That's why you create you create the tent. You create the triangle structure. So
air can rush.
So air can rush underneath the bottom of it and feed the flame.
What are those things that they used to have?
Bellows.
Yeah, the bell.
Yeah, the bellows. Yeah.
I think you should get a bonus point for getting what I was miming.
I know what you're talking about, man. I've known you for a really long time. I know. I speak Dale. It's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like that's the man, and because so the alcohol, so I do know a little bit about like combustion from like motors and engines and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the alcohol burning off, like because it basically disappears and it burns so hot and so clean that there's like no trace of it left. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's wild. Like to think of like building an oxygen alcohol rocket motor is
Yeah.
yeah, like that's but if something goes wrong with that, it's a massive explosion and it's a hot burned out explosion,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's how you grenade your engines.
Yeah. And another thing von Braun was really good for besides building rockets was giving us fucking deep quotes. And here's one. He said, I have very deep and sincere regret for the victims of the V2 rockets, but there were victims on both sides. A war is a war. And when my country is at war, my duty is to help win that war. And you're like, okay, sociopath, but
Well,
there's a point.
you have to look at it from like you have to look at it from like the time frame and the perspective, right? I mean, like he's speaking on behalf of his country, on behalf of his I mean, it's easy to take historical quotes out of context and be like, that shit's toxic or that shit's right. Like I mean, he's it's you got to think of the time frame, right?
Yeah.
And like
so,
at that, oh good.
Oh, sorry. No, sorry.
I
don't want to cut you off because I was gonna kind of sidestep into a different topic.
Do it.
Not a fully different topic, but it was did you know that Werner von Braun was actually arrested by Himmler?
I did not know.
So I'll just read this chunk.
Heinrich Himmler.
SS General Hans Kammler, who was an engineer, had constructed several concentration camps, including Auschwitz, had a reputation for brutality, and had originated the idea of using concentration camp prisoners as slave laborers. So this is just kind of talking about the whole, because there's this talk about Werner von Braun had like the V2 rocket factories where they use slave labor from the Jewish people from the concentration camps. So a lot of people blame Werner von Braun, which of course he's partially to blame for. So this is just talking about that.
I'm sure that was an administrative detail that somebody else ordered. It wasn't necessarily him. I mean, I'm not praising Werner von Braun.
It was Hans Kammler's idea to start doing this. Yes. So it was his idea to using concentration camp slaves as prisoners in the rocket program. Arthur Rudolph, chief engineer of the V2 rocket factory at Peenemünde, endorsed this idea in April 1943 when a labor shortage developed. So basically, you had so many of the German population going to fight in war.
Yeah, that there weren't anybody left
to people to make their stuff.
Yeah, totally. And that's like supply chain issues and factory workers and stuff. England had the same issue. My grandmother, one of the people from my family, the matronly folk on my mom's side, worked in a like a munitions factory because like they had nobody to build stuff. So she made pots and pans for the war effort, right? Like they're like smelting as much metal as they could and turning it into like pots, pans, canteens, those kind of things to ship off to the soldiers. So there was nobody to work, so the women worked, right? That's how how it was done.
What was that chick's name in the posters in America?
Oh, Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah, exactly.
I speak Dale.
So it was even said that more people died building the V2 rockets that were killed by the V2 rockets.
Yeah, absolutely. They're expendable, right? They treated them as expendable.
Yeah, these poor people to death.
Yeah. Well, they were already half dead when they brought them in. They were sitting in concentration camps being malnourished and basically tortured, right? So they brought them and they just worked till they died. It's the same principle throughout history with wars. You see that all the time, right? It's how the railways were built here in Canada. They brought, Chinese people over and like they basically just killed them and worked them to death and buried them along the line. And it's sort of this unfortunate thing that happens throughout history.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was somber. Let's talk about something cool.
So we're not done talking about this. So von Braun admitted visiting the plant in Middlework on many occasions and called conditions at the plant repulsive. but claimed never to have personally witnessed any deaths or beatings, although it had become clear to him by 1944 that deaths had occurred. And now this is where we run into the hanky stuff, because if you look it up, there's a bunch of people who accuse Werner von Braun of actually knowing about what was going on in these plants and touring them, and actually saying for them to, like, whenever anybody would be slow or whatever, they beat them up so that the other workers would work faster and stuff. And then later, Werner von Braun claimed that he was aware of the treatment of prisoners, but felt helpless to change the situation, which...
That's public relations 101. You toe the line, you say the lines that you are told to say, and you deny plausible deniability, and you don't talk about the situation. And it's easy for somebody in power to be able to say stuff like that, right? Like, oh, I didn't see any of it happening. I was too busy focused on the future projection pieces of it, and I didn't notice what was happening down in the actual work center area. They know what's going on. They're told not to say it.
And what I think happened was this is just like me putting it together. I think he kind of knew what was going on, but like he said, he couldn't really do anything.
There's nothing
he felt
admitted
powerless.
that. Yeah.
And this next thing I want to talk about is actually an example of why he might have felt powerless, because von Braun had been under surveillance since October 1943. Yeah. A secret report stated that he and his colleague Klaus Riedel and Helmut Grutrop were said to have expressed regret at an engineer's house one evening in early March 1944 that they were not working on spaceships, because that's what Werner von Braun always wanted, to go to space. That was his whole thing.
Yeah.
So back then he's just basically like, I can't believe we don't get to work on spaceships. It sucks. And that they felt the war wasn't going very well. And then this was actually considered defeatist attitude. And a young female dentist who was an SS spy at the party reported their comments. And then Himmler falsely charged von Braun as being a communist, or a communist sympathizer.
Yeah.
So, and had attempted to sabotage the V2 program, and considered that. And Himmler also said that since von Braun regularly pilots his own government provided airplane, he might be a flight risk and go to Britain. Yeah. So because of this, they were arrested by the Gestapo. But then this other guy, Albert Speer, convinced Hitler to reinstate Braun, because in his opinion, they wouldn't be able to finish the V2 rockets or get very far with it.
Totally.
And then Hitler finally conceded that von Braun was to be protected from all persecution as long as he is indispensable, difficult though the general consequences arising from. Okay, I'm going to read the sentence again, because this is like a direct quote from Hitler.
Yeah.
It's not just me mincing my words. Okay, von Braun was to be protected from all persecution as long as he is indispensable, difficult though the general consequences arising from the situation. That doesn't really make sense.
Well,
anyways, on Hitler's word himself, von Braun was to be like protected. So this von Braun's turning into like fucking Forrest Gump. He's just like everywhere,
stumbling his way through history.
Like Himmler decides he hates him and has him arrested because he's a communist sympathizer, and then Hitler's like, no, we need him to build the fucking V2 rockets and stuff.
Totally. Yeah. Sorry, this guy's kind of important to our entire shooting down the United States. Yeah.
I mean, we could probably do a whole episode of von Braun himself.
I would say so. I mean, he's like you said, he's historically significant and relevant to like a lot of things that we have today too, right?
We're not going to, but we could. I'm just saying that because like one of the reasons I was like in research mode was because I slept on the von Braun research until this morning, and I was just like going fucking like high school / college cramming.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. I mean, that was the whole thing. I mean, like, high school was many, many years ago, but I remember researching von Braun even then, and I'm like, it was closer to the time frame than we are now, but it's no less interesting, right?
Yeah, like just it's wild because the whole time he just wanted to go to space.
Oh, that was his whole goal. And to this is where like I have an appreciation for it. I mean, to have a single-minded goal like that
Yeah.
is like I feel like this is very selfish. I wish I had that for myself in some degree, right? Like
You're not alone, sir.
he had a goal. He wanted to get to that goal, and he like we're talking wars, country changes, job changes, title changes, who he's going to work for. None of it was really in his control. He just sort of got like you were saying, he Forrest Gumped his way to like the end goal of trying to get to space. And
Yeah.
he did it, and then he wasn't satisfied with that, right? And then he died before like he even got a chance to like actually apply it to.
Yeah, he died in 77.
Yeah, like a year after I was born.
Cancers, because he got kidney cancer in 73.
Yeah.
And then they're like, you shouldn't work. He's like, fuck it, I gotta go to space. And they kept working. And then he died of some other cancer. He actually died of some other cancer.
Not even the one that, yeah. So, so like a fascinating, interesting character. And even just to be allowed to exist and be so public and so like recorded and so formally ingrained into the United States society, right? Like this is that whole like cult of celebrity thing as well, right? This dude committed like wartime atrocities, but he was like welcomed with open arms and became a celebrity in the United States. Like this is the fucking stuff that you can't make up, right? Like
and it's like, but at the same time, there were people who knew what happened, and they were like, we got to get rid of von Braun. Like in that that documentary we watched, they covered that a bit, where they showed like people protesting with signs and stuff about von Braun.
Yeah.
But it's, and another thing too, it's like he was only a Nazi for like Nazis were only around for like what, 6 years? 30.
Yeah, it's a pretty limited span. Yeah.
So he only worked for the Nazis for like 5 years or so, and then he worked for like American space stuff for like over 30 years. So it's like, at what point do you stop being a Nazi and start being like the father of NASA?
So that's sort of part of it, right? Like, what does that absolution look like in your mind, right? Like, does it, for some people, he'll never be anything other than a Nazi, right? Or you know, right? So it just depends on where you look at it in history, which is fair comments, right? Like he was part of that. And whether or not he was coerced into it or like asked to be part of it, or because he was smart, he was brought into that fold. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know. We weren't there. So and we weren't here.
That's the whole draw of Operation Paperclip.
It is. It's fascinating.
How do you come to terms with this on your own moral compass? Like, sure, we could have taken all the research that they had learned and stuff through nefarious means and just burnt it all.
Yeah.
And
then
we would have lost so much, like not even that, just like medical stuff too. Like how, like which medications treat what stuff, because they were doing all of that stuff back then.
Totally. So advances in modern medicine and science, and like they were made by that time frame. Like that's the crucible from which they were forged, which is fucking wild to even think about that, right? So like you can hate it all you want. It made advances and it made things that we currently have that we take for granted possible. And that's I guess that's the part that I find the most fascinating about it.
Yeah, like you could even think about like where we would be as a society if we just ditched all this stuff.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Yeah, because one of the things that we got too was fertilizer and stuff, because
we got via napalm. But yeah, exactly, right.
One of the side products was fertilizer that we wouldn't have and stuff. So it's like
all the best shit was accidents. All the best things that we have in this life were accidents. It's like,
like the internet only came
like the internet.
Military.
No, we all know that Al Gore invented the internet. We all know that.
Al Gore maybe could have Edison the patent for it, which is stolen from someone else.
Right.
Yeah. I said it.
Dale said it. He went there.
That's a very popular other conspiracy, is that most of Edison's patents were stolen from other
scientists. The other inventors. I've heard that before too. Oh God, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is all this death and destruction boring you, Jeff?
Yeah, it's old news. I'm tired now. Yeah, it makes me sleepy.
Violence
makes me sleepy.
Before, at the beginning, when we were talking about how von Braun actually turned himself over and stuff, we could cover that right now.
Sure. Yeah, I got to stop at 5:30, so we got some time.
Okay, yeah, we got 24 minutes.
21 minutes.
That's a good
Cool.
time. Hour and a
Lots of
half.
time. Yeah, absolutely.
In early April, as the Allied forces advanced deeper into Germany, Kammler ordered the engineering team, around 450 specialists, to be moved by train into the town of Oberammergau.
You got this, man. Come on, I believe in you.
Oberammergau.
There you go.
Oberammergau. Easy peasy. In
Not
the
bad.
Bavarian Alps, where they were closely guarded by the SS, with orders to execute the team if they were about to fall into enemy hands.
Emily.
I get Oberammergau and then I can't say enemy.
Yeah.
Emily.
You got there.
Does anybody else? You know what I think it is? When I grew up, we had a neighbor called Mr. Emily, and we would go to like his part of the river because he had this little beach, so we'd always call it the Emmonies. So that's probably why I say Emily instead of enemy.
Because you're saying it quickly, right? And, and it's not really a thought process thing. And you said, let's go to the Emmonies like a million times. And and now the enemy of my friend is my enemy. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah. And you're just a wonderful, colorful individual with.
And it's hard to talk.
It's hard to talk. Talking is difficult.
It's the exact reason why I have a podcast.
That's right. Yeah, it's talk practice for Dale, so that he can talk his way into.
Oh my God, we should start a third podcast.
Oh, here we go.
Talk practice.
Talk practice. That's like
such a good title.
That's a great title for a podcast. Look at us just inventing things while we're here.
Nice.
We're the next Werner von Braun's.
Patent. Nobody take that.
Yeah, patenting.
Nobody.
That's property of Outrage Podcast Incorporated.
Yeah. Nobody Thomas Edison us on that. Okay, so basically the SS people who were guarding von Braun and his 450 specialists were told that if the enemy comes and they're going to take these guys, just fucking kill them all, which is brutal because Germany also didn't want their technology to go into the hands of the enemy.
And I think Germany was also afraid of the Russians getting a hold of their technology too. That was one of the other parts of it. So, yeah.
However, von Braun managed to convince the SS Major Kummer to order the dispersal of the group into nearby villages so that they would not be as easy target for the US bombers. So he was like, why don't you just send us all into little groups into these little villages?
Yeah.
And they won't be able to bomb us all. And then the guy's like, that makes sense.
Isn't that what happened? Wasn't that what Peenemünde was? That was all this Peenemünde. That was where the US bombed that place where all the scientists were, and that's what forced them sort of out of hiding.
Oh yeah, that was covered in that 1142 documentary, and Peenemünde was where von Braun and these 450 specialists and stuff, because he had this like group of 500 and a bunch died in that Peenemünde.
Yeah, but then the rest of them were like, they were forced to kind of disperse. They had nowhere else to go. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine. That's a good thing. I keep forgetting about that because Peenemünde was like
that was the research facility or whatever.
The main research for the V2
for the V2s.
Yeah. And then it was funny because not funny. In that documentary, the Jewish kids when they were kind of talking to the
Nazis
ex-Nazis and stuff, they found out about Peenemünde, found out where it was, and then the Allies were actually able to bomb it. Yeah, it's wild. So on the 29th of April, 1945, Oberammergau was captured by Allied forces who seized the majority of the engineering team. Von Braun and several members of the engineering team, including Dornberger, which I'm not going to mention him again, so I shouldn't have brought that up. I always feel bad when I bring up names because every time you hear names, you're like, oh, I should remember that. But you don't have to remember Dornberger.
Yeah, it's not an important.
It's a good name, but
great. I could go for a Dornberger right now.
Yeah, they made it to Austria on the 2nd of May, 1945. Upon finding an American private from the U.S. 44th Infantry Division, von Braun's brother and fellow rocket engineer Magnus approached the soldier on a bicycle, calling out in broken English, "My name is Magnus von Braun. My brother invented the V2. We want to surrender." And this is how Werner von Braun and his brother Magnus surrendered. After the surrender, Werner von Braun spoke to the press We knew that we had created a new means of warfare, and the question as to what nation to that what victorious God and the
You're right there.
question as to what victorious nation we were willing to entrust this brainchild of ours was a moral decision more than anything else. We wanted to see the world spared another conflict such as Germany had just been through, and we felt that only by surrendering such a weapon to people who are guided not by the laws of materialism, but by Christianity and humanity could such an assurance to the world best be secured. So
Oh, wow.
the
Yeah.
reason von Braun surrendered to the States instead of Russia was because the States were Christian, and von Braun had kind of converted to, like, when the war started, he was like a Lutheran unpracticing, and he was like widely known as an atheist.
Yeah.
But then some people were saying at the weight of all the stuff that he'd done, he turned
He
to
wanted to turn
religion
to God. Yeah.
yeah,
He's
he
looking
became a
for
Protestant.
absolution. We talked
Yeah.
about this earlier. Yeah.
And then so he said, wait, where was I? Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Okay, yeah. So von Braun, who developed, so he said, although the weight of the death and destruction his science had wrought, oh, sorry, fuck.
You're right there.
Yeah, so he said it was said that he wanted people to follow the Bible. Oh yeah, and he said, through science, man strives to learn more of the mysteries of creation. Through religion, he seeks to know the Creator.
Right.
That was sorry, my notes just got out of order there.
That's okay. Yeah,
But,
I mean, that's a pretty common thing when you experience
mhm.
you know, a life like that and you don't know where to turn, right?
Yeah.
Not for me. That's not my jam. I got lots of
Have you not turned to the God
No, I
so
mean,
that you could come to terms with all your fucking
my
atrocities you've done in your life?
Yeah, I've committed so many. It's time for me to go absolve my sins.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I mean, that might be the popularity of atheism. You got a lot of people not doing a whole lot of anything, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Like, I mean, I don't need absolution from getting up and going to work every day, right? Like, I just don't. You know, I take care of the people around me. I take care of my friends. I take care of myself.
Mhm.
And you know, I don't need guidance for that. I need people to talk to, but I don't need, like, what are we talking about? Like supernatural guidance,
Yeah.
unearthly guidance, holy guidance. It's not required, right? Like, I didn't commit a bunch of war crimes, so, and I can't talk to anybody about. So, I don't know. That's one of those things. I mean, it's situational for everybody, right? It's a very deeply personal spiritual piece. So
Yeah.
my main piece with that whole thing is, like, this is a dude who his whole goal is science and, like, going to space, and then he turns to God for his absolution and to, like, for his to talk about his sins. And I find that piece amazing. Like, somebody so heavily scientific. This is, again, like, I don't know. I feel like I'm a Werner von Braun fan club member, but like, it's just a fascinating story, right?
And the thing was, like, that quote I read out of context and in the wrong order was he did see the parallels of science and religion. Like,
Yeah.
he was one of those guys who's like, you have science, but religion and stuff can mesh up. Like, they don't have to be against each other. And that's why I was saying, like, through science, you learn about your creation as a human, and then through religion, you learn about the Creator. So it's kind of like two sides of the whole coin, I guess you could say.
Yeah, totally. No, and I mean, it's entirely, I don't know how to say this. I'm not really an expert on any of this stuff. We're just podcasters. But yeah, I mean, who's to say what is right for you personally to, like, rectify your life, right? Maybe religion helps lots of people. So let them have that. You've been there. We're old. We're both old church boys from the olden days.
Yeah, I actually got this tattoo.
Oh yeah.
It's an upside down cross, and that was basically to remind me of all the kind of dissatisfaction I had with the church in my youth, so that when I grow older and softer and seek, like, absolution for my life of sins, that I remember how the church had failed me emotionally and spiritually in my youth. So I remember that when I'm older to like kind of remember those same things. So I don't turn to it out of a source of like, I don't turn to it in
Last ditch
weakness.
desperation when you get
Yeah.
older. Yeah, totally. Like, oh, the end of my life is coming. What do? I got to get right with God. And I'm like, hey, do you though? Really? Is that necessary?
Yeah, I don't know. Like more and more now, I'm starting to think of Christianity as two separate religions, where the Old Testament is of one God, and the New Testament is like not the same God and stuff. But yeah, and
that's
the weird thing is,
what is that? A non-monotheistic approach to Christianity?
Yeah,
yeah.
Because if you look at it, Christianity went from monotheistic, where there's one God, to
multiple different iterations of the same God.
Then it went to like Father, Son, Holy Spirit. So it went to the Holy Trinity of three. And then you can even look at like Catholics who worship saints and stuff. So the saints became like the pantheon, and they all have a parallel with the other gods. Like all the saints have parallels to like the Greek gods and stuff, like the god of speed or whatever. You have the saint of speed and stuff. So
yes, sir. That's where I come in. That's my Catholic upbringing. That's the saints are high priority.
Did you pick a favorite saint?
Well, I'm named after St. Jude, so I have to go with St. Jude.
St. Jude?
Yes.
But your name's Jeff.
No, it's my middle name.
Oh, Jeff Jude.
Yeah, now everybody knows my middle name. They're gonna dox me. That's
for talk practice.
Yeah.
Can you be Jeff Jude?
Sure.
I'll be Dale Hubert because that's my middle name.
Oh, is that your middle name? Yeah. Okay. Nice.
It was my grandpa's name. So
nice.
Apparently Hoybert. It's shortened to Herb, but that's a popular Dutch name. And
that makes sense.
The English way to say it is Hubert.
Right.
Shortened form is Herb.
Right. Herb Tarlick. I'm gonna sell ads for the radio station. I think all of the French boys in my birth year were given St. Jude as like as a middle name. It's one of my many middle names, one of my couple middle names. So yeah,
you have like, more than one middle name?
I have two.
Give me your
two official
name.
No, I'm not doing that on a podcast. I don't need people to know my full name on the internet. I'll tell you later. I'll text you.
Tell me. Okay.
All right.
We could keep. You're almost at the time you got.
I'm almost at my time limit. Yeah, I got.
And we could keep going on Werner von Braun with his career after there, but we don't have to. Like, you could look up the Wikipedia. Like, he went.
It's fascinating. I'm just going to tell you right now. Like, if you look up Werner von Braun, you can go for hours just reading about him. He's an interesting character.
He did develop the Saturn V rocket, which got us to the moon. He was the head architect of that. So that's his big contribution to society.
Yeah. Yeah, he was part of the Apollo project as well. So for getting all the various iterations of the Apollo rockets up there too.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to hear what it says on von Braun's tombstone?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be cool. Let's do that.
It is Psalm 19:1. Quote, "The heavens declare the gore." I'm just gonna start over. Psalm 19:1. Quote, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork."
Firmament's such a great word.
Yeah, it is. And some people actually point out that this is proof that Werner von Braun was a flat earthist.
Oh, really? Oh my God. Next week on the Dale Show.
Firmament is the dome that covers the flat earth. And they're saying this is a nod to the flat earth, which I don't believe at all.
I don't think so. I think in order for Werner von Braun to create rockets that were going to blow through the trajectory of the Earth's atmosphere, he would need to know that there's curvature there to make that happen. Yeah. And, I'm just saying.
Yeah. And how to get it back to Earth and the angle and stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
He had to work all that into his big math equation.
His mathology. Yeah.
So let's close out by saying some other scientists you can look up from Operation Paperclip that were very important were Kurt Heinrich Debus, He also has a crater on the moon named after him.
Yeah.
He was one of the head guys at NASA's Launch Operations Center. So he wasn't head of NASA. He was like the head of the launch center, and he worked with Werner von Braun in the Pemanude. What was it called?
Oh, Pima New Day.
Yeah, Pima Nude. And there's a wild picture of this guy sitting beside John F. Kennedy.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to look that
If
one
you
up.
go to Operation Paperclip,
Yeah.
it's the header picture on the
Oh,
website.
right. Okay.
And then another guy was Kurt Blom, like I mentioned him before. Walter Paul Emil Schreiber. And Eric Traub.
Right.
Those were all guys that were pretty big news.
Pretty big news. Pretty big news. Yeah, right on.
So I hope this helps everybody understand Operation Paperclip. My favorite part is that it's basically toilet notes. Responsible for everything.
That's how the world gets done. The world gets done through toilet notes. That's just a thing.
You know what that reminds me of?
First you play Wordle and then you write down your thoughts. That's how toilet thoughts work.
On Batman Returns, when he had the papers that they had all flushed into the sewer, and he had all the Penguin had all scotch taped them together, and he's like holding them up. He's like, everything ends up down here.
Down here,
or something like that. He's just like holding these shit notes on paper that was in the sewer.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's where the best work gets done for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any questions or anything about this?
No, I'm good, man. I think we covered lots of stuff on here that was very interesting and thought-provoking stuff. So I like that this is a bit of a departure from our usual sort of wild conspiracy theory pieces. So I remember you mentioned before we were talking about meat and potatoes, right? Like getting out of the nitty-gritty. A lot of this stuff is like the foundations and the building blocks for like how these theories exploded into the future. So what we're dealing with now, it's almost like telephone, right? Like here's the facts. The US brought over German Nazi sympathizers and made them build rockets for us so we can get to the moon before Russia. And they're like, okay, cool. And then they're like, and now the earth is flat and there's Nazis everywhere. And this is like it's just like it's that extrapolation thing, right? So so it's really cool to do an episode like this and talk about such a almost like polarizing, interesting figure like Werner von Braun and like that whole situation. And then like this leads into MK Ultra, which I'm friggin' stoked. You better have me back on for MK Ultra because that is my
definitely.
That's my jam. I love that. That's where this whole thing gets interesting. Then you don't hear anything for a few years, and then wild ass conspiracy theories after that.
The only thing I'm intimidated about is the research for MK Ultra, but I think it should be fine.
This is going to be an interesting. What do we got? A couple of weeks to research because I'm going to have to put some time into this.
There's that book Chaos we both read. And then I'm going to finish listening to this last podcast on the last MK Ultra thing. And then my conspiracy guru Adrian still refuses to be on the podcast because I don't know. He doesn't want to be known as like a conspiracy guy because he's scared it will like ruin his life or whatever. I'm like, nobody watches the show, Adrian.
It's just me rewatching it later.
But I told him, he said I could call him and pick his brain about MK Ultra. So I'll see what like he has to say about it. So it should be good.
Okay. If you do get a chance to watch anyway, there's a movie with what's his name? Wow, that's super handy. I told you about it before. American Ultra, it's called. It's it's like a more modern take on it, and it's I mean, it's all farcical. It's an action movie, but it's actually really fun. And
I've seen it. It's good. If you want to go on a binge, watch American Ultra?
American Ultra, yeah.
Watch The Manchurian Candidate.
Manchurian Candidate, yeah, that's a good one.
Watch Born Identity.
Yeah.
Born Supremacy. Born Ultimatum.
And what was that? There's also that George Clooney one from like the early 2000s or the late 90s, The Men Who Talk to Goats or something like that. That's MK Ultra too.
Yeah, because they were trying to like do mind control,
mind
reading and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's more of a farcical look at what they're trying to do, whereas these other ones were like
it's a comedy versus
science fiction versions of what they did.
Yeah,
Or
totally.
if you want to watch the original Manchurian Candidate, Angela Lansbury's in it. She's the bad person.
I like that. Angela is
I think
probably
I just
hot.
spoiled it.
Sorry, I gotta go have. All right, I gotta get out of here, Dale.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks for
you
being
so
on
much.
again, dude.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's
as
always a
always.
pleasure.
Great. So I'm stoked, man. MK Ultra is next, and that's where we get the meat and potatoes get cooked.
The meat and potatoes. Yeah, and if anybody out there wants us to talk about anything specific, just
let us know.
Comment on this. Usually I just like when something hits me, I'll talk about it. Like I never know. Like I always like we finish this and I'm like, whatever. Not like this time where we're going to talk about MK Ultra next because that's why we're talking about this as a setup.
Yeah.
But I usually just wait until I guess divine inspiration strikes me. But yeah, so
or he falls out of Wikipedia rabbit hole and then has to talk about something. That's the more likely of the two
or I'm
pieces.
like, I want to learn about that. I'll go learn about that.
Totally.
Yeah. So if you want to hear anything, let us know, either me or Jeff. Jeff's probably going to be on here for the foreseeable future because
sweet.
He's very conspiracy friendly, whereas most people you start talking about this stuff, they do that like annoying thing where like, I don't believe that. And you're like,
I just like to keep an open mind, man. Like it's and I love storytelling. So I find it like interesting how we get from that's why I love this one today, because it's this historical piece that creates all these other spin-offs, right? It's like the tales we tell ourselves to keep us entertained or what we think we know. And it's like, how do you blend those two pieces together? So I love this stuff. That's what makes it fascinating. Makes life interesting.
It does.
It's fun to talk to Dale.
Yes. And it's fun to talk to Jeff.
All right.
Yeah, it's like 5:30. I better let you go.
I gotta go. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us on the Dale Show. We'll see you again next time for MK Ultra.
Later.